The SP-404 has been stirring up some in the lo-fi community for weeks now since its release. It's been all the rage, and with good reason. It is light years ahead of all other SP models and is very affordable for what it can do. As more of a tactile performer myself, be it like finger drumming or performing samples live, my main issue with it was the lack of dynamic control with individual pads. You are able to add effects to individual pads, so why not velocity? Well, that problem has now been fixed with the latest firmware update. The SP workflow is especially unique because of multi effects, but I kind of see where they're going with this. They're inching closer and closer to what the MPC is able to do, which is a tall order because the MK2 is half the price. I have a strong feeling that they're not going to be slowing down with updates anytime soon. It's going to be tough to keep up with them all. In this video, we'll be making the exact same beat with both machines. We'll be comparing them in a tactile fashion, so things that a finger drummer might be interested in. Basic performance-based functions of both instruments. So pad command and setup, mute groups and things like that. Effects. We'll be touching on the physical feel of each instrument as well. Price, build, as well as design. I think that now is the perfect time to compare these two in light of the new MK2 update that just came out. A big thank you to today's sponsor, DistroKid. We'll be taking a look at my streaming income. I am by no means even close to making a living off of streaming at this point, but it's just interesting to know how much income is coming from what platform. So more on that later in the video, and spoiler alert, Spotify is actually not the #1 source of income. It's kind of weird. Not what you expected. FYI, important info for current or soon-to-be MK2 owners. The SP-404 MK2 ships with an older firmware, so it's missing some features. I've included a link to the latest firmware update in the description if you guys want to keep up to date with that. Let's look at price, build, and design. The MPC One is $1,000, and the MK2 is literally split in half. It's $500, as listed on Perfect Circuit. So if you're feeling real nice right now and you want to treat yourself, get yourself a little gift, well, now you know the price. Now's the time for me to invite you to use the affiliate links that are listed in the description if you're feeling at all tempted to purchase these instruments. In terms of build, the MPC One is just clearly a higher quality build than the SP-404. It's bigger, it feels sturdier, the knobs are definitely a little bit smoother. It's twice the size, there's more space, which means that executing patterns like from a finger drumming standpoint, it's a lot easier with the MPC One. It just feels beefier overall, but it's still small enough to be considered a portable instrument, of course. It pretty much is a standalone DAW. There's a very descripted and well animated screen right there, which is clearly why it's double the size of the SP-404. The MK2 has a much more descriptive screen than earlier SP models, but it doesn't really compare to the MPC One. Not even close. But on the other hand, obviously the MK2 is a lot more portable. It's kind of more fun to travel with and maybe perform with outdoors. It's also battery powered, which makes it so convenient. A little side note, I encourage you to please use rechargeable batteries. In fact, shout out to MyVolt. They actually sell USB powered batteries, so that's even better. It's so simple, but size really is something to consider when it comes to desk space and the rest of your setup. Feel of each instrument, so mainly the pads is something that is so important to me and anyone who's a tactile musician. In my opinion, this is a huge win for the MPC. There's not really that much of a comparison here. The MPC pads are just way bigger, they're more elevated, they're juicier, bouncier. It's no question why MPC is top choice for finger drumming. They really got this down to the T. I heard that machine pads are also comparable to MPC, but I've never tried those out, so I wouldn't know. The 404 pads aren't bad, like they feel nice. Because it's a smaller instrument, naturally you don't have as much space, the pads are a little bit smaller. Unlike previous SP models, there's 16 pads, so that's better than 12 or 8. But depending on the beat that you play, they get a little bit wonky. So like if I play a house pattern like what I just did, check out the kick. I lose the kick sometimes. Whereas if I do the same thing here, I'm not losing the kick, it's still there. Whereas if I play a more boom bappy sort of 16th note groove, I don't really have that issue. So like I said, it really depends on the groove that you're trying to play. It almost feels like there's a capacitive touch thing going on, meaning that the sensor of the pad activates before you actually touch it, which makes it a little bit more glitchy. If you're using the MK2's pattern sequencer and maybe you're just plugging one thing at a time in, then it's not really that big of an issue. But if you're more of a tactile performance-based player, you're playing in grooves and stuff like that, this is a problem. Now let's get even more hands-on and make a beat from scratch with both of these machines. I'll walk you through some differences, pros and cons. So we'll start with the SP-404. The first thing we'll do is just upload some sounds to these pads. Personally, I like to go kick, snare, hi-hat, open hi-hat, maybe some toms here, and a sample on the top left. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna drop a kick, snare, hi-hat, open hi-hat, and then the toms as well. And then of course the sample will drop that on the top left. So these are all the other kits that are saved in this project, and this is the one that we're currently on. So I'll hit I. I'll take the gate off of all these. And then we have a kit. Almost all of the drums from this kit are from my Meat and Potatoes acoustic drum sample pack. I've left a link to that in my bio if you'd like to hear some more examples of that. I have to say that for this function specifically, the 404 software is so easy to use. I'm connected here via USB and transferring directly from the app to the 404. It's instant. And like I said before, all the other kits and banks are lined up here. Super self-explanatory, love it. Talking about the MPC software, honestly, it's something that I haven't really gotten that into yet. It's an expansive DAW within itself, which I'm not too interested in exploring at this point because I already use a DAW that I'm comfortable with. To me, it feels a little bit redundant to learn a whole new expansive DAW software when I could just export from Standalone into Logic, the DAW that I use. On top of that, I have so many other synths and softwares to keep on top of for the purpose of this channel. That's where I'm at this point. That being said, I'm not discouraging anybody from using the MPC software. I'm sure it's great, but it's like I said, it's not where I'm at. So I guess I just do it old school style. I upload everything onto this SD card. We'll go to assign samples. We gotta do some basic menu diving here, places, head over to kits, MPC, drums, use these. Kick goes here, snare goes here, hi-hat, that's the open hi-hat. So this is the closed one, will go here, open will go here. Toms, so I think the higher pitched one I put here on the other kit, so load it. Low one goes here, and then we'll go back to the melodic sample, which was that one. So that one will go up there. All right, so now we have the exact same kit on both machines. It's interesting how the dynamics are a little bit different from one machine to the next. Like the snare seems a bit quieter on this one, and that's something we'll be doing later. We'll be mixing the drums on both machines. Let's look into chopping this sample now, which is pretty much just as easy on both machines. We'll go through the whole process on the 404, and one thing to take note of is that when you upload something through the software, it auto detects the tempo, which is great. So it knows that we're at 80 BPM. We're gonna hit Shift, chop, hit Enter, auto mark. I'm gonna chop this into 8 pads. And just go for it. Now we're chopped. Kind of a noisy sample. I'm sort of cheating here because I chose the tempo of the sample for the sake of this video. So let's go back, and this time I'll do it manually. I'm gonna choose where I want the chop to happen. Totally messed that up. That wasn't great, but it's no problem. We could change the starting point of each chop. I'm going to zoom in here with Enter. Right, so now I have those 2 chords, for example. We're going to go Enter, and if we want to assign this to pads, we can, right? We'll go back to the auto chop though. With the MPC, you have a lot more options of reassigning to pads, but it's different. Coming to think of it, it might have actually been quicker to start with the sample on the MPC and then add the drums later. But in any case, let's try it with this setup. So edit samples, we're going to this one here. Stop it. Shift, trim into regions. So it's gonna automatically trim into however many regions that you want. We're currently on 8. You could also go with manual, which is a very easy way to change the start and end points of the samples. So we'll go back to regions and chop it into 8. We're gonna go shift, convert, assign slice to pad, and we're gonna assign to these pads up here, right? Shift, convert, assign slice to pad, do it. Let's go to the second one now. Shift, convert, and we'll go to a 11. Do it. Go to the third pad now. Shift, convert, a 12. So this is a longer process. Like, we should have started by chopping the sample and then adding the drums afterwards. So looking back at this particular chopping workflow, the SP-404 was actually a lot more time efficient. There's this very easy and efficient exchange option on the 404. So shift exchange, let's say I want to move these two toms around. I'm switching them. So I'm switching H11 with H12, just flipping them. There we go. So now we have high to low tom. Let me show you how you do that with the MPC One. So luckily we have 2 empty pads here. I'm going to go copy the low tom over to this pad. Right, so now we have 2 of the same thing. Now I'll copy this one over to this pad here. Right, and then I'll copy this one again over to this pad. So now we have the high to low tom thing going on too. Now we have an extra tom. If you want to get rid of it, shift, delete, get rid of it. This is a complex instrument and I'm always learning new things about it. So if there is a way to exchange pads like on the 404 that I'm just not aware of, comments. Dynamics and modulation. This is where the MK2 update comes in very handy and it brings it a step closer to the MPC. First off, shift and pitch and speed, which is envelope. So now we have ADSR control. Bit of a swell maybe. And if I just hit pitch and speed, I could control the speed of the sample, the pitch as well, volume. So let's check out the drums. That kick is pretty loud. Yeah, I want that snare to be more up front. With the volume control, this was a much needed update. So glad they did this. This is a cinch to do over on the MPC as well. Let's do it. Kick, snare is just super low. So let's bring the snare up, warp samples, master, there we go. So a very similar process here. Everything else is so easily accessible here. Samples, you could change the start and end point. Envelope, so same thing, ADSR, LFO, modulation, effects. Effects is something we'll touch on a little bit later as well. Now we'll take a look at mute groups, which once again is very easy to set up with both instruments. With these types of setups, I usually like to use 2 mute groups, so one for the open hi-hat and snare and one for the melodic samples as well. For those of you who don't know what a mute group is, it's when you choose a group of pads to sort of gate each other, meaning that when you press one pad, it'll stop the other from playing, but within specific groups in that kit. Like I said, open hi-hat and snare. Let's go over to warp samples, master, mute group. We're gonna select these 2 and we'll call that mute group 1. So now let's deselect that. I'm gonna go with all of the melodic samples and we'll call that mute group 2. So now they're gonna cancel each other out. So within this group, everything is monophonic. Within this group, it's also monophonic. But if I play the group separately, it's polyphonic. One very convenient thing with the MPC is that you could change the volume of the entire mute group. So let's choose this, bring it all down. So now all the pads in that group are quieter. With the 404, there's a mute group pad right here. Choose all the melodic pads. So that's 1 mute group. Go over to E, 2 mute groups. So the melodic pads are clearly too loud. Let's go pitch shift. Bring all those down. I wonder if there's a way to choose all of them at once. Doesn't look like it. In terms of pad setup, these kits are pretty much ready to go, but we still need to take a look at effects. In my opinion, the 404 really shines here. Personally, I just think that the 404 effects are completely unique. There's nothing else quite like it. While effects assignment isn't quite as expansive and intuitive as the MPC One, there's just something spontaneous and lively about the MK2 effects. Something that's clearly geared towards live performance. There's like a DJ quality to it. In fact, that's how I've used the 404 a bunch in the past. Just simply uploading a full-on track onto each of these pads and then playing through it like a set, adding effects to it while it plays. There's even a DJ mode on the MK2, which I've been exploring. While yes, there is way more flexibility with effects on the MPC One, it's basically like a DAW. That's how you apply the effects for the most part. They just don't have that spontaneity and character that the 404 effects have. I think there's a reason why the lo-fi community just goes nuts over the MK2 effects. There's 37 effects in total, so you have the easy to access ones, so filter, drive, resonator, delay, isolator, DJ effects looper, and then multi effects. So this button here, there's 32 extra effects to choose from. The MK2 also has 4 buses for effects, so 2 that are very easy to access with the push of a button. You could just jump back and forth between these, add on effects, jump to the next one. And if you head over to effect settings, you have 2 extra buses here for effects as well. Buses 3 and 4. These are more master effects. You'd have to menu dive to change these ones. If you'd like to do a deep dive, there's a lot more to say about the MK2 effects. I've actually done a full video on that. For this sort of tactile setup, if you're finger drumming, your hands are going to be occupied anyways. So we'll just add something simple, 303 vinyl sim. Turn that compression up. You could turn the noise up as well. Let's really boost the 303 vinyl sim. And we'll turn that noise back down. Now with the MPC, effects is a whole different story. Like I said, it's essentially a DAW. You've got an option of bus effects and a lot more buses than on the MK2. I've actually done a video on my favorite MPC Standalone effects. There it is. But with the 404, you're a bit more detached from that DAW mindset, which I love. The effects are what you get and they're built right into the instrument. That being said though, I'm sure there's going to be so many new effects updates with the MK2. That's something that I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. One thing that the MK2 can't touch yet, sidechain compression. You cannot do this sort of thing with the MK2. There's some effects on the MK2 that sort of get sidechainy, like the compression if you really blast the attack and turn down the sustain. Let's try that. It's not the same. As I mentioned before, go back to warp samples and there's an effects tab. I could add 4 different effects onto all of these individual pads. So yeah. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this comparison. Are you team MPC One or team MK2 and for what reasons? If you've got the budget, maybe the best answer is to combine the slick fat pads tactile MPC One with the effects of the MK2. So now let's get back to my streaming income and which platforms it comes from. Spoiler alert, Spotify is not a top earner. So here are some streaming services or platforms that bring any sort of income. I don't get like a shit ton of streams, so these numbers are nothing to brag about, but still it's kind of just interesting where the money's coming from. Apple Music, $12.75. iTunes, $2.37. Spotify, $195.58. No surprise there. Amazon Unlimited, $2.67. And then there's KKBox, which is $320.37. KKBox is not even available in North America, and it's my highest earner. DistroKid kind of just swoops in and distributes my music to platforms that I'm not even aware of. I don't even know they exist, and they're not even available in the place that I live. They take care of all that. On top of that, they keep up to date with all of the up and coming platforms and distribute my music to those as well. Clearly, a lot of these up and coming platforms are brand new, so they're not going to be big earners. But then every so often you have something like KKBox that randomly brings you income. I highly recommend DistroKid. The starting rate is $20 a year as an independent artist, and that's to release unlimited music, by the way. If you haven't signed up yet, there is a 7% discount link in the description of this video. And so there you have it. It's been great. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was a really fun video to put together. Hopefully you guys have a bit more insight between these two instruments. Consider subscribing if you're into this sort of content, and maybe even hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I release a new video. I've left affiliate links for the MPC One and the MK2 in the description of this video. So if you purchase using either of those links, I actually make a small commission from that sale at no extra charge to you. So it's one of the best ways of supporting this channel. I think my job's done here. See you guys soon.